Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a multiplayer FPS in Unity. Today we are going to be creating some UI for our game. More specifically, we'll be creating a health bar and some kind of way to display ammunition. That's what most of you guys said you wanted to see in the last video. I also have plans for some weapon switching, and a lot of you guys suggested some kind of sniper with a scoping in mechanic. I think that sounds really fun. But I won't be doing it today. Today it's going to be UI, but I definitely want to do it soon. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity, and what I want to begin with is just taking our kill feed and kill feed item scripts and dragging them under the scripts folder to organize things a bit better. Now let's go under our prefabs folder and find the prefab called player UI and drag that into our hierarchy. As you can see, I'm in our main level 1 scene so that we can see our player UI working on top of our regular level. Let's now switch into 2D mode and focus on this element right here called thruster fuel. Remember, we created this in a previous video, and basically it's just a black image with a bit of transparency, and on top of that we have a thruster fuel fill, which is a tinted image that we then scale up and down depending on our thruster amount. And then we have this image here, which is basically just an icon, which we are going to rename it to. So what I thought we would do is maybe just scale this up a bit. So let's change the width to something like 45 and then actually use that to create our health bar. So in case you want to duplicate all of the settings, you can go back and watch the previous video where we implemented it, or you could just have a look at how things are set up here, here, and here. And you can just pause the video to duplicate everything. So now let's duplicate this by hitting Ctrl-D or Command-D if you're on the Mac, move it over a tiny bit, and we only have a few things that we need to change on this object. First of all, of course, we need to rename it to something like health bar, and we can just leave the background image. Then we want this to not be thruster fuel fill, but health bar fill, and let's definitely tint this in a reddish color, something like that. And let's also swap out the icon. So the icon that we're using right now is what the icon called button accelerator up sprite. And we got this from the standard assets. If you import the cross-platform input on the sprites, you can see they have some default icons. But I thought most people probably, or at least some people, aren't using the standard assets. So I thought I would provide this for you in an easy download. So if you go in the description, there's a link to where you can download the multiplayer FPS assets. And if you double click the folder that you get when you download that and go under GUI, you can see I've put in 3 icons here. The normal thruster fuel icon from the standard assets, and also a health icon and an ammo icon in case you want to use those. We'll be implementing those in just a second. But let's just take these 3 icons, so select all of them and drag those into the GUI folder that we have inside of Unity. Now let's select those 3 inside of Unity and change the texture type to sprite. And let's also change the format to true color to make sure that Unity doesn't do any weird compression on us. Now let's find our thruster fuel icon and let's just change that to the thruster fuel icon that we just imported into Unity. It's not going to change anything in the scene, but it is going to make it neater because it's better to get it from there than in some weird subfolder under the standard assets. Let's also find our health bar icon here and drag in the health icon we just imported. So that should already make things look quite decent. And the only thing that's left to do with this health bar now is hook it up via script to the actual health amount that we have. So if we find our player UI object, you can see we also have a player UI script. Let's double click that to open it up in Visual Studio and have a look at how we do things using the thruster fuel, because we're going to be doing things almost the exact same way. So I can see I have a bunch of things open here, and I'm just going to close all of it. Except for, whoa, and we even have 2 versions of the player UI. Let's try that one more time. There we go. So as you can see, we have a reference to our thruster fuel fill object, and we want to create one for a health bar as well. So let's create a serialized field of type rect transform because we're going to be scaling it, and let's call this one our health bar fill. And if we scroll down a bit, you can see that we are changing this inside the update method. And that's because we want to do this every frame so that we can update our UI as soon as something happens. And we are using the function called setFuelAmount, which we declare down here. So let's just create a new function that is just a symbol, not void, called setHealthAmount. and it's going to take in a value between 0 and 1, representing our total amount of, or our current amount of health compared to our total. So if we just input 1 here, that's going to be 100% health. And if we scroll down, we can now implement this function. So let's go void set health amount. It's going to take in a float with the amount, just like we do up here. And it's going to set health bar fill dot local scale equal to a new vector 3 with a scale of 1 on the x, the amount that we passed in on the y, and 1 on the z. So that's going to make sure that we scale it correctly. So now all we need to do is get a reference to our current amount of health and pass it in here. Except in order to do that, we need a reference to our player component sitting on the player object. And currently we only have a reference to our player controller. The way we get this reference is by implementing this function called setController that we then call through the player setup script. So when the player is set up, it's going to call the setController, pass in the player controller, and we're going to store it in this private variable. I want to change how this works a little bit. Let's begin by creating a private player here and calling it player. Then instead of having this be setController, let's have this be setPlayer, and it's going to be pass in a player, which is going to be called underscore player, and then we can set player equal to underscore player. So the private player component, or the private player variable, is going to be equal to the player that is passed in. Then we can get a reference to the controller by simply saying controller equals player dot get component, because remember all of these components are sitting on the same object, and so we can just do dot get component of one of them to get one of the others. And we'll get the one called player controller. You could just have easily have kept the controller thing and then just have gotten the player component the same way, but I think this is cleaner because the player component is kind of central, and the player controller is one of those spin-off components that do a tiny thing. The player itself is where we handle stuff like health, killing, dying, that sort of essential stuff. So what we can do now is simply make sure that we also change the name of this and that we pass in the right component in the player setup script. So if we go into Unity now, it's going to throw an error for the player setup that we can then just double click on, and it will take us to the right line, which is line 51. So in here we want to say set player instead of set player controller, and we want to use get component player instead of player controller. And that should actually be everything. So now that we have that working, we should be able to go into our player UI and go down here and reference the player. And the health variable does sit under the player, but it's currently private, so we can't just do .health. And we don't want to, because our health is currently a value between 0 and 100. And we want a value between 0 and 1. And we want to have that even though we change our maximum health. Say we set our maximum health to 250. So we can't just divide by 100, we need to divide by our maximum health in order to get a value between 0 and 1. So inside of our player, let's create a little helper method for doing exactly that. So let's find our script here called player. And let's just jump in here and create a tiny little method. And this is just going to be a public float because it's going to return a float. And we are going to call it get health percentage. And of course, this is not percentage, this is a value between 0 and 1, but you get what I'm saying. And what we'll do is just return current health divided by maximum health. And we'll need to, of course, cast this into a float so that we don't get some weird integer. We want to have all the decimal places that we can get. So inside of player UI, we can now go player.get get health percentage. And there we go. Now our health bar should actually be working. Of course, we can't really test this on the computer unless we make a build and damage the player or implement some kind of test function. So what I think we should do is just continue on, create the ammunition as well, and then we can see it all working at the end. So now what we want to do is implement a tiny bit of UI in order to get the ammunition working. And I want to begin by going under the health bar and thruster fuel, selecting both icons and kind of scaling them up. So let's set our width to 25 and do the same thing with our height, just to make them a tiny bit bigger, which looks a lot better. So what I want to do now is right click on our player UI, go under UI and then select panel in order to create kind of a faded background for displaying our ammunition. Let's also make sure that this is anchored to the bottom left corner, and let's drag it over here somewhere around there. I think that looks pretty good. Let's drag this down a bit to say there, and let's also change the color here to a black, and we can maybe fade it out a tiny bit more. Something like that looks fine inside the game view. Actually, I want it to be more clear. Something like that. What we want to do here is, of course, change the name to ammunition. And we'll definitely want to throw in an icon. So let's just duplicate one of the icons from over here, drag it under the ammunition object, and simply move this over on the X. Something like that looks pretty good. I think we can also maybe scale this down a tiny bit. There we go. And let's snap this to the left and not to the bottom. Oops. There we go. Awesome. So I think that already looks quite decent. Of course, we need to change the icon over here. So let's go under GUI and drag in the ammo icon instead. Looks just fine. And maybe even move this down a tiny bit more. Maybe move this up a bit. Something like that. I think that looks just fine. And then what we can do is just rename this to icon, remove the one there. Let's also go UI and then text. And we want this to be anchored to the right hand side. We want to definitely scale it up. Let's also move it over here. Let's make it white so we can actually see it on the background. Change the font size to something like 24 and change the text to just say 20. And then what we'll do is we'll snap the text to the right and we'll center it on the vertical axis, and then we'll just move it over here to create a tiny bit of padding around it. And in the game view, you can see that looking just fine. And then we can take our ammunition and maybe just move it in. There's no reason for it to be that wide. And we'll rename this one to ammo text so we can easily see what it's about when we reference it in the inspector. So I think the UI looks good. So let's jump inside of our player UI and actually update this through script as well. So in order to do that, we need to create a new function. So we'll do set ammo amount. And we'll pass in, let's just pass in 20 for now. Let's implement the function. That's going to be void set ammo amount. And it's going to be an integer. I will do underscore amount. The other ones were floats, but this is going to be just a whole number showing the amount of bullets that we have left. And all we want to do is go and add a reference, of course, to our text object. So we'll do a serialized field of type text. And whenever we do something with text, we need to be using unityengine.ui. So we'll do a text here, and we'll call this one, say, ammo text. Then down here, we do ammo text.text equals the amount. And we need to do toString here because we are converting this into a string for our text. Awesome. And then all we need to do up here is, of course, get a reference to our current amount of ammunition. And in order to do that, we need a reference to our current gun, which sits, or which our weapon manager knows what is. So let's do up here another private variable for our weapon manager, not weapon graphics, weapon manager. And we'll just call this one weapon manager. And we'll set weapon manager equal to player.getComponent weapon manager, not weapon graphics, weapon manager. There we go, the exact same way that we set the controller. And then here we can go weapon manager dot current weapon, get current weapon, there we go, dot, and then bullets. And you can also easily display the maximum amount of bullets by just using that instead. But for now, we're going to be displaying only the amount of bullets that we actually have left. If you want to have multiple magazines that can be swapped out and then you can run out, you can display that here as well. It's super easy to extend, and it should be working right away. So what we can do now is just reference our UI elements. So let's drag in our health bar fill. Let's drag in our ammo text. And let's hit apply on this and remove the player UI from the scene. And what we do then is go and not hit play. Let's just jump into the lobby here. See if it works on the local client. And if everything is looking good there, we can make a build. So let's do a test room. And as you can see, we won't see the health updating, but we can see that when I now shoot, our ammunition does update. One small issue with this, and this is something that is not wrong with our UI, but with the way we implemented reloading, is if I now press 3 times, 1, 2, 3, you can see it says 0, but it doesn't reload until we then press again. And that's really annoying. So to fix this, all we need to do is find the script for reloading, and we do that under our player shoot script. So let's double click that, go under our update method, and let's find the, not the update method, no, let's find the shoot method here. And you can see that we do check if the current amount of bullets is less than or equal to 0, but we do that before we shoot. And that means that if we have, say, 1 bullet remaining and shoot, it's not going to reload. It's just going to shoot until you then press again, and this function is called, and now it's going to call the reload method. So in order to fix this, what we want to do is simply do a small if statement down here as well, saying if current weapon dot bullets is less than or equal to 0, well, then we want to call weapon manager dot reload. Awesome. And we can't just take this down here, because then you would be able to shoot while reloading, or if you it were to start reloading here and you then cancel the animation, if you're able to do that at some point, we can't currently do that, and then go back, you would be able to shoot again. Weird stuff. So we need to check both places. And that should actually fix that error, but I am going to show you another one that I encountered right after recording the last video. So let's create a room here, and you can see now that if we hold this down and then click, 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 and then click, it's just going to reload automatically. So that's awesome. And the issue I encountered is if we just hold down our mouse here, it's going to work just fine. You can see that it stops to reload. But if I then force a reload by hitting R, we can actually shoot while it's reloading. And that's a big, big issue. So all we need to do here is change a little thing that I completely messed up in the last video. I'm so sorry if this has caused you headaches. I don't normally do bugs in the videos, but this one was a bad one. So I don't even know what I was thinking. So you can see here that we are checking if we're not the local player. And if we are not, then we want to return. And then I put an AND symbol here. So if we're not the local player and we're not currently reloading, then we want to return out of the function. That doesn't make sense on any logical level whatsoever. What this needs to say is if we're not the local player, then we want to return, or if we are reloading, then we also want to return. Okay, so that should make everything work much better. So now when we hit play and create a room, you can see that if I force a reload, I'm not able to shoot until it comes back. Awesome. So now things are working just the way that we want them to. And we should now be able to create a build here and see this working inside the build. So let's check if our health is working as well. And I do need to have a sip of water once in a while. So that was nice. So what we'll do is just jump into the login menu here, and we'll do a full play testing session here. So we'll be logged in and everything. We'll do the same thing here. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. And in here, we're going to just create a test room. Everything's working. In here, we're going to join that test room, and that takes 5 seconds normally. So we should see that join now. Awesome. And you can see both the health bar for the currently active player down here and the health bar for the other player over here. And now what I can do is shoot this guy, and you can see the health bar over there going down. And when it reaches 0, of course, he's going to explode in a big fire. Awesome. And you can see the same thing working here. So we'll shoot this player, and you can see the health is going down until he reaches 0, in which case he will die. There we go. Awesome. So that is everything working. You can also see that when the player dies, the UI does disappear. So that looks really nice. And our ammunition and everything is working just perfectly. Cool. So that was pretty much all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you want to see next, if it's not something I've already mentioned that I want to do. And yeah, without further ado, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks to all of the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in October, and a special thanks to Sultan El-Sharif, Faisal Marifai, and James Calhoun. Become a supporter at patreon.com/Brackeys.